Hello, I'm Nima Rajan. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesman is responding to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's call for Beijing to end its arbitrary detention of Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Zhao Lijian says there is no such thing as arbitrary detention, and he's urging Trudeau to, quote, stop making irresponsible remarks after the Prime Minister said Beijing's decision to charge the two Canadians with spying was linked to Canada's arrest of Chinese tech executive Meng Wanzhou. Today, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also called on China to release the two men that he says face groundless charges of spying. Secretary Pompeo says the U.S. is deeply concerned by China's decision to formally charge Mr. Kovrig and Mr. Spavor. The World Health Organization is reporting the largest single-day increase in coronavirus cases by its count. More than 183,000 new cases have been recorded in the last 24 hours. The UN Health Agency says Brazil led the way with over 54,000 cases, with the United States next at over 36,000. Experts say the rising case counts can reflect factors including more widespread testing as well as broader infection. Chinese Canadians report that they are facing racist threats, insults, and social media messages as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. 43% of those responding to an online survey have been threatened or intimidated, while 50% report being called names or insulted. More than 60% have changed their daily routines to avoid unpleasant encounters. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem says there will be long-term economic damage from the COVID-19 pandemic. He says the central bank expects to see growth in the third quarter as people return to work and households resume some of their normal activities. But Mr. Macklem is warning that we shouldn't expect any economic bounce back to last because of uneven reopenings across provinces and the unknown course of consumer confidence. Canada's top military and civilian defense officials are apologizing for not responding sooner to questions about systemic racism in the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces. The apology is contained in a letter written by Defense Department Deputy Minister Jody Thomas and the Chief of Defense Staff, General Jonathan Vance. It was distributed to troops and Defense Department employees on Friday. The letter coincides with a wave of anti-racism demonstrations in Canada and the United States following several high-profile incidents involving minorities and Indigenous people. Ottawa has promised to add more inspections and oversight to help stamp out the spread of COVID-19 among migrant workers. The move clears the way for Mexican workers to return to work in Canada's agriculture sector. Mexico's government stopped allowing workers to leave for Canada following at least 3 worker deaths on Canadian farms. The deal includes improvements to the temporary foreign worker program and the establishment of a working group with Mexican and Canadian government officials to deal with the issue. The federal government is sending out a 30-page guidebook to about 250,000 federal public servants outlining plans for their eventual return to their offices. But many are expected to keep working from home for some time yet. The Treasury Board president says the reopening of federal work sites will vary based on local conditions and each department's requirements. Most federal public servants have been working from home since mid-March. COVID-19 restrictions are easing in Quebec, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Saskatchewan is moving to phase 4.1 of its reopening strategy, which means youth camps can open for day use only, and camping is allowed by reservation only in national parks. Day camps, gyms, arenas, cinemas, concert venues, and places of worship can reopen across Quebec with a maximum capacity of 50 people for indoor gatherings. As of yesterday, restaurants and bars in Manitoba were no longer limited to half capacity, and childcare centers and retail stores can return to normal capacity. A Toronto consulting agency reports that it has been flooded with calls from companies that want to address anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism in the workplace. Hamlin Grange says those firms want to know everything from how to craft messages of solidarity to how to fix their own diversity and inclusion problems. Some experts caution that training programs don't always work and may even lead some people to double down on their bias. The number of orphan wells in British Columbia has more than doubled thanks to the closing of one oil and gas company. The BC Oil and Gas Commission says it has designated 401 wells and 3 facilities formerly owned by Calgary-based Ranch Energy as orphans, which means there is no owner willing or able to restore those sites. Ranch slipped into receivership in July 2018. A federal judge has ruled former National Security Advisor John Bolton can publish his tell-all book. The Trump administration had tried to block the release because of concerns that classified information could be exposed. The decision is a victory for Bolton in a court case that involved core First Amendment and national security concerns. But the judge also made clear of his concerns that Bolton had, quote, gambled with the national security of the United States. Egypt's foreign minister says his country wants the UN Security Council to prevent Ethiopia from taking a step forward on its newly built hydroelectric dam on the Nile River without an agreement. Ethiopia says it will start filling the reservoir of the Grand Renaissance Dam in July, even after negotiations with Egypt and Sudan hit a dead end. Egypt fears that operating the dam without a deal will severely threaten its water supply from the Nile. In an interview with the Associated Press, Foreign Minister Shukri says the UN has a responsibility to address threats to international security, and unilateral actions by Ethiopia would constitute such a threat. South Korea is urging North Korea to scrap a plan to launch propaganda leaflets across the border amid high tensions between the two countries. Seoul's Unification Ministry says the plan to dispatch millions of anti-Seoul leaflets will not be helpful to South-North relations. Meanwhile, some observers say weather conditions could prevent balloon launches from the north, and it may cause them to use drones instead. Stargazers in Africa, Asia, and parts of the Middle East were treated to a partial solar eclipse on Sunday. It's known as a ring of fire because the moon covers most but not all of the sun. It occurred during the daytime hours in areas that saw the spectacle. In Dubai, people could see over 85% of the sun covered by the moon, with photographers taking stunning photos of the eclipse. Well, that'll do it for today's news update. I'm Nima Rajan. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.